put one of these things on you, you were going to be on some quiz show. And maybe they should. Now, Tom, you did well in your 35 minutes. We timed you, and we're glad you did it. I need to probably tell one story about Tom because I worked with him, appreciated him a great deal. And I don't know if it was my character or his character, the two characters together. We had 40 school districts at that time, and we'd come to a principal's meeting, and Tom would ask about certain programs and how things were going. And they'd go around the table, and everybody would give their report. And he'd look at me, and he says, "Now, how's the 41st district doing?" That was the best thing he ever told me, because it gave me a whole lot of flexibility, telling me, now he didn't probably see it exactly this way, that I didn't have to do what the others were doing. I could do my own thing, and that was good. When Scott contacted me and got that letter, I began thinking, what did I do when I was here? And then my mind went in a different direction. I said, I know Bingham High, I know Bingham students, I know Bingham Canyon, I know Copperton, but it kind of followed in a chronological order. My first contact with Bingham is up in the canyon, not up in the canyon, but at Copperton. And I was a student at Draper Junior High. And that was back in the days when the school district had a league for junior high students in basketball. And made the team, and we were looking forward to this trip to Bingham. Bingham was way, way up there, but we looked forward to going. We got up there and we went in the gym, and there was just about enough room around the exterior of the gym, off of the floor, for 2 rows of seats. Now that wasn't highly unusual, because that was the same at Draper and at Union and Sandy and West Jordan and all of the junior highs we had at that time before they started consolidating. That was my first memory of Bingham High School, Bingham Junior High School. It was a good one. I also remember in the summer there was a recreation league baseball you could play. We looked forward to going up to Bingham again. The thing we were supposed to do when we went to Bingham was to hit the ball over the head of one of the outfielders, because if it did, it would roll all the way to West Jordan. And you could get an easy home run. Well, there was a little bit of truth to all of those things. Not totally, but a little bit of truth with all of them. But that was a lot of fun when I was a very young man and had a chance. If anybody told me someday I'd be a principal at Bingham High School back in those days, never would have happened, of course. It was an interesting experience in my career to come to Bingham High School in 1980. When Tom got his students in here, he forgot to lock the doors and keep a lot of them out. And they kept coming and coming and coming and coming. And we did top the 3,000 mark at this school in 1980. And I came over and spent 3 months, 3 months with Jim Shurtleff. He was the principal ahead of me, because I had to learn this program that they had put together. And I don't know where they got it. Listening to Tom today, maybe I got some ideas of where they got it for open classrooms. This kind of went along with it. We had so many students, we had, if you can imagine, 2 starting times. One would come with muscle loads and everything, and they would get started and going. Then we had the second group would come an hour later, and they would start theirs. And the third hour, we started having lunch. And lunch was a full period long. We had 4 of those. Now, can you imagine? 3,000 kids, 4 lunches, all that period of time. They were good kids, but they were kids. They were teenagers, and it didn't take them long to figure out little things that they could do or not. We tried to keep them certain ends of the bill. I did have an army of assistant principals. I'm forever grateful for those that I had. Some of you will recognize some of them. Linda Sandstrom, Bob Wood, Dennis Hansen, Clyde Melberg, and then one that happened a little bit later, which has always been a great friend of mine, and some of you people, if you met him, you'll know what kind of person he is, even though on the outside he seemed pretty belligerent, pretty hard to deal with. His name was Emerson Boyd. In my first month here, I didn't know if his name was Boyd Emerson or Emerson Boyd. And I made sure I passed out the checks at the end of the month so that I could get that straight. He was also the first person I remember speaking to me in faculty meeting in such a way that I wondered, what's he going to be like if I have to deal with him? the first thing I did when I got that opportunity was just encourage him to get into administration. He was an old Bingham student, or at least lived in Lark 1 year at Bingham, then he left and went someplace else. It was just a good man to have back, and I wanted to tell that story about him because he had the Bingham spirit, and especially when it came to dealing with old staff members, long-term staff members, and George Sluga, which was always a challenge, but Emerson knew how to do it, and I was forever grateful for him. I also, in my memories, I started going through this little ordeal. I thought, what else do I remember about Bingham? And it wasn't about Bingham, but it was about Jordan High, because in 1956, 57, the students that lived over on the west side of the river could no longer go to Jordan High. They had to go to Bingham High. And I found some newspapers one day in my other job down at Riverton Elementary in their library, and it talked about how upset the people were that their students couldn't get over to Jordan High anymore, had to go to Bingham. Well, you couldn't tell any of those students a couple of years later that that wasn't the best thing that ever happened to them. They did go, and they appreciated what they had. Now remember, they had to be bused all the way to the canyon every morning, and it was quite an experience for them. Well, they had to be bused over to Jordan too, as far as that goes. But I do remember that. In fact, I do remember the first person, it's funny how some things stay with you. The first person I remember passing away of the class of 58 from Jordan High School was Niall Beckstead. Now, where does a name like Beckstead come from? Over on the west side of the river. He was the last, he was in my class, last senior class to be able to graduate from Jordan, and they had to go the other way. I've got one other thing that I'd like to talk about. I wish I could remember the dates. You're lucky that I can even remember where I'm at. Those senior moments are creeping in more often than not. I've been at a pulpit before in my life, just recently, and I was up there speaking, and I had one of those senior moments, and I turned to Kathleen to help me, and she looked at me like, what do you want? I tried to mouth it to her. It didn't come. Finally, somebody in the audience whispered, Gordon Hinckley. Okay, I know those things happen to me, so I'll still go ahead though. While I was here, the federal government made a decision with special education students at certain levels had to be in the mainstream. They could no longer be in private, or not private schools, but in schools designed just for them. And so they had to leave those areas and come into the regular high school. I remember one student in particular. I can say her name because there's a school now named after her, Carrie Sue Hamilton. And Cletus and Sharon brought Carrie Sue to Jordan, came in and sat down with me. They were concerned about how Carrie Sue would be accepted at Bingham High School. It was easy for me to tell them that there was no school on this face of the earth that would treat her better than the students and the staff at Bingham High. Well, we went ahead and accepted. They didn't have any choice. They had to bring her here. The student body officers especially grabbed Carrie Sue's hand and helped her get started. And she became a real help for them. And the rest of the student body saw it. And she had a wonderful experience here. And Cletus and Sharon have since told me that several times. I lost track of them shortly after I left here. But it was a very, very meaningful experience for myself, for the students and the staff at Bingham High. And I do believe that Bingham was the right place for her. There was something it ties in, but there was something about the old school and the support from Copperton mostly. And I'm imagining maybe some of you that knew that even better than me, but I think the high school activities program was what those people up there lived for in a lot of cases. And boy, they came down here, and what are they going to do up in Copperton? They don't have a basketball team, football team, or any of those. They came with them. And even when I came along 6 years later, they were coming down from Copperton to be a part of what went on at Bingham High School. That was wonderful. Some very interesting characters, and I love them all to this day. It's a good place. It's a great place. It was a wonderful experience for me to be able to be here and be a part of what went on. Thanks to Scott and the Alumni Association for this meeting tonight, for this association. I appreciate it very much. You did do one thing, though, Scott. You told me in 4 years, this building will be here longer than the old building. Is that right? Every chance he gets, he tells me how old I am. What was it? Go ahead.
40 years here, and it was 44 years in Concord.
4 years. I don't know where all those years went, except when I start to move. Okay, thank you, thank you.